Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to the US, and we're also going to stick to New England here in the northeast of the country, and we're actually going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a number of times before. Now, if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're most definitely best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but they have been doing a few other styles in recent times as well, and I've tried a few of those, and they've been pretty damn good. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from this brewery before. It's a style that they do supposedly do very, very well, so I'm really quite curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. And this is the first beer I've tried from this brewery in about 3 years as well, come to think of it. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up to Massachusetts, which is one of the states just to the north of Connecticut, where I am just now. We're going to go to a little place called Charlton, which is about halfway between Boston to the northeast and Hartford in Connecticut to the southwest, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Treehouse Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Curiosity 134. It comes in at 5.3% ABV. On the can they're listing this one simply as an American Pale Ale, but we know that this one is a New England Hazy Pale Ale. So yeah, my very first Pale Ale from these guys. I've had a lot of really good like New England doubles and single IPAs, but never a Pale Ale if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, this could be a really quite interesting one to try actually. But yeah, let's crack on with this one and see what it has in store for us. A big shout out as well to Tabor in this review. He brought this one down. He was at Treehouse a couple of weeks, I think maybe a week or so ago actually, and he gave me this can to have a little look at and told me this is a really nice beer. He had a few that I could have picked out, but I was quite curious to try one of their Pale Ales actually. So yeah, thank you to Tabor for giving me this one to review here on the channel. I need to remember to send him the link for this review. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Treehouse Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. And there are some very good things on the channel these days, so I would highly recommend that you do that. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Treehouse Brewing Company once again for the first time in about 3 years. So yeah, Treehouse Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based primarily in Charlton in Massachusetts, which is about halfway between Hartford in Connecticut to the southwest and Boston, Massachusetts to the northeast. And the company was founded by 4 friends back in 2011. So this is Dean Rowan, Nate Lanier, Damien Goudreau, and Jonathan Weisbach. So Dean has a background as a plumber, Jonathan is a graphic designer, and Damien co-owns and runs a gym, while Nate was a construction manager. But the guys had homebrewed together from around 2008 in Nate's kitchen, and then moved to a small 2.5 acre farm in Brimfield, which had a treehouse on the edge, and it was this that they would choose for the name of the brewery. But the brewery continued to grow over the coming years, but they moved in 2013 to Corran Farm in Monson, which was owned by one of the founders' families, and there they expanded their capacity from 150 to 900 gallons per brew, or in non-freedom units, this is 570 litres they were brewing originally, and they scaled it up to 3,400 litres, and they also opened up a little tap room on this site as well. But a few years later, having continued to be successful, in 2016 the company bought land in Charlton and planned the construction of a 53,000 square foot or 5,000 square metre brewery, and they went on to open this in May of 2017, and this can produce 60,000 US barrels or 9.5 million litres of beer per year, which is pretty pretty impressive. But the previous site at Monson is home to, they were doing some barrel aging and stuff like that in there for some time, but over the last few years they've added a larger outdoor space and another mezzanine level inside the brewery, and then in 2019 they purchased a farm in Woodstock in Connecticut, and they've been experimenting there a little bit more with barrel aging. I think they've moved all of their barrel aging over to the site at Woodstock now. They're doing a little bit of open fermentation there, and I did see that they were producing a little bit of cider on that site as well. But 2020 saw them add 2 more locations to help relieve the pressure on their Charlton site. These can be found in Sandwich on Cape Cod and Deerfield in western Massachusetts, and they've also made several additions to their main site in Charlton as well over the last few years. But in May of 2022, Treehouse also purchased Tewksbury Country Club and converted it to a large beer hall with a retail store, and they're still continuing to operate the golf course up there as well, which is kind of interesting. But Nate is the master brewer, or brewmaster, whatever they call it, and according to Untappd, these guys have produced around 1,030 different kinds of beer as of September 2023 when we're filming this one for you. So a very prolific brewery, a brewery that's grown a hell of a lot over the last few years. I didn't realise they had so many locations, and they'd opened up quite a few of those between now and when I'm reviewing the last between now when I'm reviewing this one and when I reviewed my last beer from these guys. But yeah, it's pretty impressive how much Treehouse have grown, and it doesn't seem that the quality of their beer has suffered in the slightest. So yeah, that's it. But that is everything I can really tell you about Treehouse Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have produced. So yeah, I think on that note we can actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just have a wee look at the artwork on this one properly before we open up. As you can see, it's pretty awesome, pretty kind of almost like psychedelic or something like that. I don't know if it actually has the yeah, I don't think it actually has the name of the artist on the side of it, which is a bit of a shame. But this is a 1 American pint can, 473 millilitres or 16 fluid ounces, as you would say in freedom units. Pale, plain, silver top on the can there. As we said earlier, this beer is called Curiosity 134, comes in at 5.3% ABV, and this beer has a few different hops in it. There's 4 in here. There is New Zealand Cascade, also Waimea from New Zealand, Citra and Nelson Sauvin. So we know quite a few of these hops quite well. Citra is an American one, 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you a nice big, in a New England hazy, it's going to give you quite a lot of mango-y character with a wee bit of lemon lime. The Nelson Sauvin is a New Zealand hop. That one gives you 16% alpha acid and a very distinctive sort of white-green grapey, almost gooseberry-like character. Cascade, New Zealand Cascade, is a little bit different and shows you a wee bit more grapefruity character than the American one. I would say the American one has a little bit more of a kind of almost like figgy, red fruity character to it in my experience. And Waimea is a hop that I've had every so often. You don't see it all that often these days, but it's known to give you a little bit of grapefruit and orange. It's quite high alpha acid as well, 16%, and it's also known for its kind of big piney character in the green component as well. But yeah, 16 to 19% alpha acid, that one can usually give you. It's a bit of a beast. So yeah, that's a summary of the hops then. I think we can get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Curiosity 134. Yeah, oh, there we go. I did get it open. So there we are. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. As I said, this is the first time I'm trying a pale ale from Treehouse Brewing, because we've had, I think most of the beers that I've had from these guys have been the double IPAs, because a lot of folk have given me the, you know, the kind of more famous ones, if you like, rather than the more sessionable beers. I'd love to try one of the kind of lagers and things like that from these guys and some of the stouts. I don't believe I've tried a stout from Treehouse actually, or a black IPA. That would be interesting. We have had a West Coast IPA from what I remember, and that was very, very nice. But yeah, you can see that this beer's poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England Pale Ale. You've got a lovely kind of pale mango juice type colour with this one, and you can see there's a solid finger and a half of a frothy, I would say, kind of cream coloured head on this one. You can see some medium-sized bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, but it does get a wee bit more foamy and soapy the further up the head that you go. But as I say, you've got a bit of, you know, a finger and a half or so of a frothy kind of cream coloured head there. But you can see the colour of this one is really quite nice. As I say, a kind of like pale mango juice. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to pale ales and things like that. But yeah, certainly looks the part. The level of haze in this one, I have to say, for a 5.3%er, if I shine the light through this, yeah, the level of haze in this one is actually kind of what you'd expect, but pretty impressive at the same time. So remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. That can vary from beer to beer, brewery to brewery, and so on. But yeah, I don't think we really need to say much else about the appearance of this one. Let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer is all about. Yeah. So, aroma-wise, this beer for me, it's quite, it's actually very, the first impression of it is that it's very kind of citrusy leaning, very grassy as well. And quite often with New England Pale Ales, I tend to find they put in, at least in Europe, they put in a little bit more wheat to them, just to give them that little bit more kind of bite and drinkability. Honestly speaking, I'm actually more of a fan of West Coast Pale Ales than I am of New England Pale Ales, because I just like, you know, a Pale Ale for me is meant to be a lighter kind of drinkable beer. And I just think, you know, the kind of more, when I think about drinkability, I always think about lagers, and probably the West Coast Pale Ale is more lagery. And, you know, the main difference between the West Coast and the New England sort of thing is the use of, the West Coast IPAs only tend to use barley malt. Not unheard of to use a little bit of wheat or oat though, but New England IPAs of course use a lot more wheat and a lot more oat, and that's why you get the haziness. So yeah, the New England Pale Ales, in my experience, in Europe at least, tend to have a bit more wheatiness to them because they've got the bite there, but American wheat I think is a bit smoother than European wheat. So yeah, aroma wise, this is really nice actually. So my first impression of this one is that it's actually quite wheaty leaning. You do get a little bit of the oatiness out of it too as well. And obviously the barley malts in there, it actually comes across as being quite well balanced in its malt base. So for me, New Englands can lean a few different ways. They can be a little bit more kind of farmhousey and yeasty, rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can have a little bit more of a kind of sweeter side to them as well. So they're all really interesting, actually. Yeah, the aroma of this beer is really nice, and it does it for me. So yeah, let's just break this down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. The backbone of this beer is absolutely like a fresh white bready bread crust. That jumps out of this one at you right away. On the on top of that, you do have, well, within that, you've got a little bit of a woody and crackery character. I always find the crackeriness that you get in these beers is a little bit more prevalent in the Pale Ales and the New England IPAs. But yeah, you've got a lot of fluffy white bread in this one. You can smell the wheat above that just kind of densifying out the bready part of the beer. And in the back part of the nose, you have a lovely kind of bit of wheaty bitiness, which I think is great. So you've got the wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose, and you have got a lovely little bit of oaty, creamy character coming out of this one too. Yeah, the way the aroma goes together in this is really nice. So lovely kind of oaty, creamy sort of thing in there. There's so lovely little bit of oaty creaminess, but you do get a little bit of dryness out of the oats as well. And usually when you have oats in these beers, it can be a good indicator of how fresh your beer is. You know, the creamier the oats are, the fresher the beer is, the drier the oats are, the older the beer is. But it's not always that simple. And I do think American oats are maybe a little bit drier than European oats as well, so that can kind of throw it off a wee bit. But there is a little tiny touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing in the middle of the nose here. But yeah, your malt base in this one is actually really quite well balanced. It's a really nice smelling beer from that perspective. But I think we've said everything about the malty side of the beer. Let's go to the hoppy side of things. For me, the green component in this beer, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one, but that's very minimal. The green component, you've got a lot of really nice bright floral aromaticity to this beer, a good little bit of a zesty, grassy character as well, which I think is great. So yeah, lovely zesty kind of grassy character coming out of this one. And yeah, for me, yeah, the sort of zesty, grassy character that comes out of this beer is really quite nice. It's very, very bright, has a little touch of spice to it, and then from the floral side of things, then yeah, at the front of the nose you get all the grassiness. The fruity side of this beer is quite nice as well. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer is what you'd expect if you know these hops. You do get a good little bit of the kind of grapefruity character, which is going to be both the Waimea and the Citra, but then there's a big kind of juicy mango in the middle of the nose. Yeah, big juicy mango in the middle of the nose, and then yeah, on top of that, you're starting to get the kind of oily gooseberry, white green grapey thing from the Nelson Sauvin, and there is like a wee hint of like an oily orange in there, which again will be the Waimea. I'm just surprised with this one though that it doesn't have a wee bit more of the kind of piney resin thing from the Waimea, but you have to remember that New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping, which doesn't give you the same level of dankness that you're going to get from West Coast IPAs and pale ales and so on. So that's definitely worth remembering when you're drinking these particular styles of beer. But yeah, aroma-wise, this is pretty nice actually. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, again, thank you to Tabor for making this review possible. This one is the Curiosity 134, a 5.3% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, pale ale. My first beer from Treehouse Brewing in about 3 years. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, that's nice. It's a really solid, easy drinker, that. Yeah, and it does have a wee bit of bite. I always find, you know, when it comes to the pale ales, especially the New England ones, I do want a little bit of bite to them. Because yeah, for me, a New England beer is always a kind of big, smooth, sort of creamy affair. And you know, I do like having a big, thick mouthfeel, actually. And that's one of the reasons I think, you know, when I think of it, I like an oily mouthfeel or I like a big, thick mouthfeel. So for me, having the lighter mouthfeel, the New England Pale, it just doesn't feel quite right in the same way that the others do. So yeah, that's probably the reason why I prefer the West Coast Pale Ales to the New England ones. But this is a very, very nice example of a New England Pale Ale. There's a lot of session IPAs out there these days as well, so you have to remember that the Pale Ale and the IPA are related to each other through the hop to malt ratio. So I believe, from a technical perspective, when it comes to IPAs, session IPAs, what they actually do is they take the malt content of the beer down but keep the malt to hop ratio the same, and that's why you call it a session IPA, not a pale ale. So the malt to hop ratio in the pale ale is a little bit different to the IPA, so that's your technical brewing difference. But anyway, this is a really nice New England Pale Ale, that's what we need to say. So let's just break it down and describe the flavour a wee bit more in depth for you, as we always do. So yeah, for me, the backbone of this beer, if we go to the middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer is absolutely that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust. That sits there in the middle of the palate really nicely. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody, kind of crackery type note coming out of the beer as well. I think, yeah, you've got the fresh white bready bread crust, a little bit of woodiness there further forward. Then you've got a Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, just kind of sitting on top of the, just sitting on top of the, yeah, just sitting a little bit on top of that white bready bread crust. And then, pardon me, getting a little bit of gas out of this. On top of that, you get the fluffy white bread from the barley malt. That just sits there. That really is a very nice pale ale, that. I have to say that. I'm not surprised, you know, Treehouse have the reputation for a reason. But yeah, the fluffy white bready character in this one has a little bit of sweetness. As I've said before, I do suspect the American palate is a little bit sweeter than the European palate is, so you get a little bit of sweetness out of the white bread in there. You've got a wee bit of a dense white bready wheat sitting on top of that. You can feel the wheat just densifying out that middle third of your palate, and then as you go down the middle, yeah, as you go down the kind of if you go down the middle line of your tongue, you start to get the oats out of this beer. This beer is not overly oat forward, I think, but there is a little bit of that oaty creaminess down the middle line of your palate, and as you go out toward the edges of your tongue, you've got a little bit more. You've got a little bit more of a kind of drier oaty character coming out of this one, which I think is very nice too. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really quite nice. So, yeah, on the in the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. That's obviously going to be the alcohol, and with this being a pale ale rather than like a double or triple IPA, that sweet side of the beer is not too prominent. That's most definitely fair to say. Yeah, the way all of that goes together, I think, is quite nice. I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate then, so we can go on to the back third of your palate. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of kind of bready build up in there. There's a wee bit of brown bread underneath and a wee bit of like white bread on top, incidentally. But as I've often said, the back third of your palate is going to give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So the back third of your palate, you can absolutely feel that you've got that lovely sort of fresh white bready bread crust in there, and it just feels that little bit dry. You've got the kind of crackery layer coming out of that as well, and then above that you get the fluffy white bready layer coming out of the beer, which is really nice. So yeah, the fluffy white bready layer in this beer is really quite interesting. I think it has a little bit of dryness to it, but it's still quite sweet. And above all of that, on the back third of your palate, you can feel the sort of wheaty bitiness just creeping over the top of the beer, of that part. And yeah, just give you that little bit of bite into the aftertaste. Then you've got the yeasty character sitting above that. So the yeasty side of this beer is quite, as I say, yeah, the yeasty side of this beer for me is quite, it's actually got a little bit of spice to it. So it feels like you've got this slightly more dense white bready character in there. It feels as if it's got a little bit of woody and crackery note to it, but it's got a little bit of an almost like black peppery spice, which I find really interesting. So yeah, you've got that nice little bit of, yeah, like, yeah, you've got that nice little bit of kind of like peppery, sort of like black peppery spice, a wee bit of like denser white bread in there, and a wee bit of like Jacob's cream cracker or something like that. So yeah, the way that all of that kind of pieces together, I think, is really quite interesting. But definitely back third of your palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate you do get a nice little bit of earthiness in there. And as you move further forward, this beer actually does have a good little bit of like dankness and piney resin to it, and that will be the Waimea that's giving you that. You can feel it's got a good little bit of pine needly character as you move further forward, but as you reach the kind of front corners of the tongue, it's actually got a real kind of floral aromatic spice to it as well, and I think that's just due to the high alpha acid of the Citra, the Nelson Sauvin, and the Waimea in this one. Obviously, I don't know which ones have been used as dry hops and early edition hops and so on, but there is a wee bit of that piney resin character. Round the front curve of your tongue, you absolutely have a little bit more of a lighter, sort of grassy type character coming out of the beer, which I think is great. Yeah, so there's a lovely lighter, grassy sort of note out of the beer. And yeah, lovely lighter, grassy note to the beer. It's got a little touch of zestiness to it as well, a little bit. It has got a little bit of a wetter kind of note to it on the grassy side of things too. But yeah, a little bit lighter and more zesty, I would say, on that front curve of your tongue. Let's have a wee look at the front third of your palate then to round off the tasting. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of bready build-up in there. It's mainly a kind of light, airy, sort of white bready character in there. The base of that, yeah, the base of that, that front third of your palate, there's a wee bit of the white bread crust in there. You do have a little bit of kind of cracker above that, then the soft white bread, and then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer for me is kind of what you'd expect from these hops. Like at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a stronger grapefruit there, and of course when it is a pale ale you want a bit of bite to it, so I think the wheat, the grapefruit and the kind of piney resin are giving this beer a little bit of punch, which is nice. So the grapefruit's there. As you move further forward you get a kind of softer juicy mango, which is one of the traits of Citra, of course. There's a wee bit of like apricot and papaya and stuff mixed in with that. And then yeah, as you go into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's more about it is a little bit more to do with the kind of oily gooseberry, white grapey sort of thing from the Nelson Sauvin. So that's interesting for sure. On top of that, you do have a little touch of a more kind of orangey note, which I think could be the Waimea. But the interesting thing is, yeah, the Cascade is going to contribute quite a bit of a strong grapefruit in this beer as well. And then further into the aftertaste, you do get a little bit of this sultana-y, figgy type thing, which I find tends to come out with Cascade too. But as I say, the New Zealand Cascade behaves quite a bit differently to the Yakima Cascade from the States. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer in that sense. But you know, regardless, we can sit and talk about these hoppy characters all day. I think this is a really nicely done paleo, and it makes me think maybe I need to visit a few different breweries and see what their New England paleos are like. Sonoma was always, you know, Sonoma from Track Brewing. That's always a really nice kind of New England hazy paleo, I would say as well. But yeah, I think we can round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, mouthfeel wise for me, it's kind of bottom end and mid-bodied. Carbonation is quite nice and smooth. It's got a little touch of an oiliness to it, this one, but quite wet at the same time, and you get a bit of dryness into the aftertaste. In terms of IBUs, I would say this beer is a fairly standard 30. So yeah, kind of 30-ish IBU beer. Then you've also got, I would say you've also got a good little bit of dryness in this one, and a bit of spice into the aftertaste as well. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of dryness from the hop base, smoothness in the middle, and a wee bit of wheaty spice, wheaty bite on top of that. Tiny little hint of sweetness, and then you've got all those lovely kind of juicy, fruity characters coming out of this too. But overall, I think this is a really nice New England Paleo. Maybe I need to think about this style category a wee bit more and try a few different ones, because as I say, I was always a bigger fan of the West Coast Pale Ales. But I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Curiosity 163, a 5.3% New England Pale Ale with New Zealand Cascade, Waimea, Citra, and Nelson Sauvin. My first beer in 3 years from Treehouse Brewing Company, and I've really enjoyed this one. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Treehouse Brewing Company as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the fairly near future. I'll need to keep an eye out for some of their beers. Until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next review.